Hi class, Jolene here. I'm going to do a little tutorial on how to create your CD for lesson 7. So what you're seeing here is a completed illustrated file. This is what yours will look like. You're going to start with a template, which I've provided, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in a minute. But I want you to first see how the finished product is going to look. So I'll zoom in a little bit on this. This is the front of the CD cover of the packaging. And this is the inside, so, or the back. So the part that slides, the paper that slides into the CD. On this piece, you must have the names of the songs, and I'm going to show you how to create those. And then this is the CD. It also needs the names of the songs. So now let's take a look at the files that made up those 3 pieces. And this is what you should be submitting. I'm going to notice over here file type. I'm going to show you, I'm going to start with the JPEG files. So these are JPEGs that I found on the internet and I used in one way or the other. Here's one I found on the internet and they got permission to use, and I modified it. I used this microphone and this tambourine, and you'll see later how I use them. This is another file I used for the background. And then here are my Photoshop files, which you're going to be creating, and I'll show you how to create them in a minute. This is the CD front, this is the inside, and this is the artwork I used on the CD itself. And then these are my Illustrator files. So this is how, these are my type trials, more type trials, and then my final logo. My final logo, and then with extra words added to it. So let's take a look at how the evolution of this, how it all started. I'm going to move over to Illustrator, and this is where you're going to start. You'll have an Illustrator file that is your brainstorm, so you can start coming up with names of what you want to create and start trying different fonts. Over here, you'll notice this is the type with the original raw type. This is the type after I made, turned it into outlines. Then I took it a step further on another file, and I started working with this font, which is called Gang Wolfic Regular, something I found on DaFont. So I started working with these words. So I just typed it regularly. And then I started noticing that the letter G kind of looked like an abstract part of a guitar. You're going to see over here how it's going to evolve. But this is what I saw, and this is what you should do with your type if you're using type to create a logo, or just even the type for the CD cover. Don't use the type right out of the can, as they say. Manipulate the type to make it yours, to customize it. So you can see here I used Pathfinder to cut these. I hooked these 2 together. I'll show you what that would look like. So here's the letters. Originally they were separate. I moved this one on top of the G. Then I used Pathfinder right here. And no, wasn't that one. Stand by while I figure out which one. Okay, here we go. It was a long time ago that I made this, and I forgotten how I did some of the pieces, but this is the one you want to use to exclude. So that's what created that gap right there that you see in this one. And I did the same thing here. So you can see I started with Rock Through the Ages, and then I originally created this logo for a client for the invitation and all the collateral for a gala. So they ended up wanting it to say Rocking. So I added these two letters, and then as you can see, I used Pathfinder to cut this out and cut this out. So that was kind of the evolution. Well, then I added this bar to create the guitar. Then I added frets to it. These are just simple white lines. And then I just added these circles for the tuning, and then cut out these circles for circles that would be on the guitar for adjusting things. I don't know. I don't use a guitar, so I don't know what those buttons are for, but on an electric guitar, they have buttons. So then I kind of split up the pieces. Here's that guitar by itself and turned in a different way, and you're going to see later how I used it. So here is the final logo, and then I added more words to it with girls, 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 because this is what's going to be used on my CD cover. The other element that I created in Illustrator is this part of the art that's going to go on the CD. So you might remember, let me going back to Bridge and to this file that I started with. This is what I turned that into by using image trace to trace these black and white characters. Then I added this piece right here. Then I used this piece of art that I bought from iStock. And going back to my Illustrator document, I separated each one of the girls. I made them get taller, taller, and taller. I added a tambourine to this one, a microphone to this one, and that guitar that I had created to this one. So going back to Bridge to look at all my pieces, you'll see here's a microphone that I found on the internet and a tambourine that I found, and then image traced to create those pieces. So that's how this now looks. And you see when I go back to my finished CD, that piece of art was added right here. So the element I want to show you about this template, I'm going to turn off this layer called artwork and turn on the layer called locked template. Let me make that bigger so you can see it. Locked template. This is the way it's going to look when you first start. I'll ask you to refer to the other tutorial that I created that explains all about this template, what all of this means, all these lines mean. So I keep this on top, and I can turn it on and off when I need to see it. Then here's, I'll turn that off for now. Here's the layer with the artwork on it. And yours should look the same way. You should already have a layer called CD, one called inside, and one called front. So if I open up the front layer, you're going to see this, which is my Photoshop file, and I'll show you how I created that in a minute. I just selected it so you can see where that is. I'll turn that off for now. So that came from a Photoshop file. And then I added this artwork from the Illustrator file that I just showed you. And again, in a minute, I'm going to erase all this and show you how I created it. Now here's the inside piece. So it has all these elements. Erase everything, or turn the eyeballs off on everything but the background. This is also a Photoshop file. So I've got that locked, and then you'll see what is on this. That is a layer that shouldn't be there. It's just a circle, and I'm going to delete it because we don't need it. This might be the same thing. It looks like an empty, something empty, or something that's, yeah, that's empty and it's over here. So I'm going to delete that too. All right, back to this. So here I just took one of those girls that I had created from this piece. So I just took her, copied her, and pasted into my CD file. Then I added, that's another empty layer. Let me get rid of that. Sometimes when you start typing with the type file and you don't even mean to, you create a layer that you didn't mean to, it just becomes kind of a little fragment. And it's a good idea just to delete those because you don't need it. And then this is the layer with the songs on it, which I'm also going to show you in a minute. Now this is the CD, and here are the elements to it. I used the same piece of art that I used for the inside for this. And you can see I've used a clipping mask. If I turn that circle off, that's just a square that's the exact same size as this. If I turn that back on, you can see that it's clipped. Then there's the songs type that I've added, more type. That looks like another, that's another piece of type that I put behind it. See that? And then the artwork of the guitars, which this was first created, as you saw, in Illustrator, and then I took it into Photoshop and added all kinds of special effects to those guitars. The same kind of special effects that you learned how to use with the Type Art project. And then there is the center circle. That's the circle that you want to make sure you don't have anything important on. All right, I'm going to take away all these pieces and come back and show you how to create this from the... All right, so let's take a look at the 3 Photoshop files that I've created. This one is the CD inside, this is the CD front, and this is those guitars that you saw on the CD. So I'm going to start from scratch and show you how to set up your Photoshop files. So I'm going to go to File and New. And here I'm going to change this to inches because the directions tell you to create a Photoshop file that is 4.875 inches by 4.875 inches with a resolution of 200, and we want CMYK color. And you can just leave this background as white, and then you click Create. So that's what you're going to start with, and then you're going to start building upon that. Make sure that it is the exact size that I just created. Let's take a look at that again. Image and size 4.875 by 4.875 and a resolution of 200. Click OK. So now I'm going to go back to showing you how I created the inside piece. I'll delete this for now, so that's how we started. And now I'm going to do File and Place. I'll do it as a linked file, and there's that background image that I want to use. I'll click Place, and it comes in much larger than I want it to be. So I'm holding down Shift and Alt to make it shrink from the middle, and I'll make it about that big. Now it seemed to me that the composition would work better if I flopped this, so I turned it upside down, and that's the way it looks. So for my inside piece, that's the only thing I have on this layer. So then I've saved that as CD inside. For the front, the way I created this one, I'll turn these pieces off. I did the same thing, added this, I placed this file, the same file I used before, and then I added the logo. And the way I did this was I copied it from my Illustrator file. So let's go to this. Copied this part. Let me take a look at this again. And I pasted it in pieces. So notice that I'm only taking this green part, not through the with or the girls. I'm going to copy that, Command C. Go back to my Photoshop file. I'll turn that off so you can see me paste it here. And I'm going to do Control V to paste as a smart object. And it's too big. That's to be expected. Oh, and I see that I got the through and the with on there, which I did not intend to do. So I'm going to undo that, or just actually delete that layer and go back to my Illustrator file and make sure that those two pieces aren't selected. So what I just did there was I held down Shift and clicked on it, and that deselects it. So I'm going to copy that again, come back to my Photoshop file, paste it as a smart object. Let me get rid of those libraries that come up whether you want them to or not. And I'll paste this in here. Now what you need to make sure of, and you should do it probably before you paste this, is that you've got 1/4 inch guides in here, so you know how far in your artwork needs to go. So I have already zeroed out here, but I'll do it again to remind you guys how to zero out, just like that. So we're 0 here, and I want a 1/4 inch. So that's 1 inch, that's a 1/2 inch, and this is a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to click and pull that guide out to right there. Do the same thing over on this side. Now it's not as obvious on this side because this is at 4.875. So figuring out what a 1/4 inch from this edge is not so obvious. So I'm going to undo that one, and I'm actually going to zero out on this side. I don't think I've shown you guys how to do this yet. I'm going to zero out on this side. Now the zero's on this side, so now I know this is a 1/4 inch from this edge. This is a way to kind of trick the system. Now I'm going to do it from the top, and I have the same issue at the bottom. This is also 4.875, so I'm going to zero out again at the bottom, and then pull this guy down to a 1/4 inch. Now I know where my safe zone is within my Photoshop file. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller there, and do that, and set that there. And now I'm going to turn this off for a second and show you this one, which is the one I'd already put in. And I want to show you how I added effects to it. And it was really just a drop shadow. So again, you learned how to do this in the last assignment with your type art, and that was the whole reason for that assignment, to show you how to do special effects leading up to this assignment. All right, so I'm going to keep that one on, and then I added this extra type, which, going back to the Illustrator, I select that one. Now I'm going to select this one, copy it, come back here, paste it, and it's going to be too big, so I'll make this a little bit smaller and put it into position. You can see that I already have this other one in position, so I'm going to delete that new one and show you that. Delete that one. For this one, this is the extra type. I added a cover overlay to that because I wanted that to be dark blue. So you can see I used this layer style and made this blue. This is how you choose the color you want. And then I added this type. Going back to the Illustrator document, I added that type, and that's right there. And I also added this effect, which is an inner shadow. So this is what it would look like if I turned it off. That's what it looks like when I turn it on. So those are the only pieces that I'm going to put on my Photoshop file. So then when I save that, going back here, you'll see that's my CD front. That's what that looks like. And then my other element is the guitars that I'm going to put on the CD. So you can see I have two different ones here, one for each side. I had them cross over like this. I'll turn this one off and just show you this one. Here is just the guitar, and I've added all these effects to it. So you can add effects to any object that you have in Photoshop, not just type. If I turn these off, you can see that it is just plain black from how it came from Illustrator, and I pasted it in there and then turned it in this direction. Let's take a look at the this layer styles I added. We've got bevel and emboss and contour. Turn those back on. I added an inner glow. I added satin. I added a cover overlay and an outer glow. So those are all the pieces that I added, or the special effects that I added, or layer styles. And then I added the knobs separately in a separate layer, and I used different effects on them to make it look like they were bejeweled. And then I added the frets also from the artwork from Illustrator, and I added special effects to those, just the bevel and emboss, because I wanted it to look like they had a little texture there. So that's the guitar for the one on the left side, and then here's the other one. And here's a really neat trick. Once you've created the styles here and you've got them set, you're not going to want to have to create them again and try to remember the exact settings for them. So if you right click on this layer and then click on copy layer style. Now if I go to the frets here on the other guitar and right click or control click, and then I click paste layer style. So the guitar on the right is going to have the exact same styles as the guitar on the right, and it's very easy to do. So copy, right click or control click on the layer that has the styles, like this one, copy it, go to the thing that you want to put it on. You see this already has it, but if it didn't, click on it, right click on it, and click on paste layer style. Okay, so those are my three pieces for my Photoshop files. All right, now we're going to go back to Illustrator and place all the pieces that we've been creating in both Illustrator and Photoshop. So I'm back to my template. It has nothing on it right now. I've got my template right here, which you're going to want to keep locked, and my artwork right here. So I'm going to create another artwork layer and then create sub layers from that. So this will be CD front, and I'll move it into this so it's a subfolder, and I'll create another subfolder called CD back, move that into this one, and then another called CD, and I'll move that one down there. All right. So let's start with CD front. I'll move this up just so it makes more sense since this is on top. So now I need to place that artwork that I created in Photoshop here. So I'm going to go to File, Place, find my Photoshop file that's called CD front. And you can see it's important that you name these files correctly because you're going to probably have a lot of files in here, and makes it a lot easier. And you can see that my mouse my pointer is now loaded with that artwork. Let me zoom in here. So I want to point directly into this corner right here, the dark blue, and click. And there it is. If you made it the exact right size, it's going to fit perfectly. Let me turn this off for like a second and explain a couple of things. Then this template there, it's telling you that the blue line is the safety line, the red line is the cut line. So you see these crop marks are matching up with the cut line. This is where when it's printed, it will be cut. This is the bleed line, this one on the outside. So we want our artwork to fit the finish size, I mean with the bleed is 4.875. That's why we made it that size. The finish size is 4 3/4. That's what this red line is, where the cut is. So there's that piece there. I'm going to turn this off again temporarily just because it's distracting, and I'll lock that too. Now the other element that I want to add is this whole piece right here. So I'm going to copy this and come back over here, and I want to make sure this goes on a separate layer because it has a bunch of its own layers itself, and it'll get really messy if I don't do it that way. So let's see what happens when I paste this. So you can see it's all these layers right here. So I'm going to go ahead right now and go to Object and Group. And now there's that group. I'll just name this Girls. And now I'm going to move this into position. And I forgot to do one thing, so let's do it now. We need to make sure we have 1/4" guides for this, for the inside and the back cover. So I'm going to turn this artwork off for a second because I want to make sure that you put the guides in from the appropriate place. And the appropriate place is the cut line. So we're going to zero out at this red cut line. And then we're going to add 1/4" guides here. Let me turn my guides back on. When you're bringing your guides in, make sure you're on the artwork layer. And even if you want to go to make sure it comes in on this layer, you can click on it. So there's a 1/4" there, 1/4". Oops. We need to have this showing because this is what we want the guides to be from. So I'm going to undo those two guides, turn this artwork off, turn this back on, but make sure I'm on this layer. Now I'm going to add those 1/4". Again, remember it's a 1/4" from the red cut line. So that should be, I'm going to undo that and zero out on this red line. There we go. And now it's clear what a 1/4" is. and come down a 1/4 inch. And again, I will zero out right here on this red corner and bring this one down. All right. So now when we turn our artwork back on, we can see that there's a couple of things. This is a little bit outside the this 1/4 inch, and I'm going to show you how to fix that right now. So I'm going to go back to my Photoshop file, the one that's the front, and I'm going to select this artwork, so girls, extra type, and logo, and make it smaller. And click there, and now I'm going to click Save. Now watch what happens. When I go back to Illustrator, it says, oh, you modified something. Would you like it to be updated now? And I'm going to click Yes. And there we go. Now my artwork is smaller and fits in there. So this is the nice thing about working between Illustrator and Photoshop. The files work together. So as long as you place the file, as I did, you can go back and forth that way. All right, so let me select this and make this a little bit smaller. Make that fit about like that, and that's my front. Now we'll come over to turning my template back on so I can see what I'm doing. Now I'm going to add the inside, or the back piece. So again, I'm going to go to File. First of all, let me make sure I'm on that layer. File, Place. And that was called cdinside.psd. And remember, I'm going to come right up to this corner and paste it. And again, you see that it fits perfectly. So now to create the songs, let me turn this off, and you're going to want to add your 1/4 inches. You already have them for the top and the bottom because it's the same as this one. So let me zero out at the red line again and add my 1/4 inch there. And I'm going to zero out on this side again on this red line, and then add this 1/4 inch to right there. And I'm not sure what these two guides are, so I'm going to go to Guides and Unlock Guides and select these two. Oh, I bet they're on the locked template layer. There they are. They're selected now, and I'm going to delete them. So if you need to delete guides, you need to go in and unlock them, and then lock them back down again. Guides and lock. All right, the next thing I'm going to add is the songs. So that's up here in, that's in this layer. I'm going to move this up here because I want to just show you how it's going to look, because I have a separate tutorial for how to create this type that I'm going to have you refer to. All right, and then the other element that I want on this back or inside, I'm using those two interchangeably. You can see this says back and this one says inside, but it's the same thing, depending on how you look at it. So I'm going to go back to this piece and grab just her, copy that, go back to this, making sure I'm on the CD back layer, paste. It's smaller than I want it to be, but the nice thing about a vector file is that you don't lose anything. I'm going to undo that, and this time I'm going to hold down Shift to size it up to where I want it. And I want to make sure that this is in the center as well as this, so I need to know what center is. So I'm going to add a guide for center, and I just clicked on the background so that I could see where the center marks are. And if you need them going the other direction, it's right there. So now when I click on her, I can see that I was way off. So I'm going to nudge that over. And then I want her to go underneath the type. So I'm just going to move that layer to underneath. And now that looks like that. And I can see I've got a problem right here that I need to fix. And I must have already done it on this one. Let's take a look at this one. Turning this layer back on. Yeah, so the way I fixed it was to make each one of these lines shorter. So they're all contained in this sub-layer right here. So I would just go in there and select each one of those and move it in, make it shorter. I won't put you through watching me do that because that's tedious, but that's how I did it. All right, so that piece is finished, and now I'm going to move to the actual CD. So I'm going to turn that template back on just so we can see what we're doing here. And this is the layer that we're going to want to be on. So I'm going to bring in the same background that I used for the inside or the back. So I'm going to click on place. Oh, but before I do that, I want to show you another little trick for how to line things up. We're going to put in something that's square on top of this, and then we're going to use a clipping mask. But so that we know exactly where to place it, if you bring another guide down to just the very top of this circle and one to the very edge of this circle, I'm going to redo that because you kind of got to get it exact to make this work. Do it one more time. About like that. All right, now when we go to File and Place, and then I do that, use the inside, CD inside, and now I'm going to click right on where these two pieces meet. And now you can see that this pretty well covers that up, that whole circle up. I just adjusted it just a little bit. Now we need to use the clipping mask to clip this out. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to turn this off for a minute and just show you this artwork here so you can see how this worked. Here's the CD. Here's the clipping path, which is this circle right here. And that's the, let me turn this back on so you can see that part of it. Use the clipping path to clip that other artwork inside. So let me show you how to do that. I need to have that circle here first. So if your template was locked, unlock it so that you can select this circle. And now it's selected. You can see it right here. Copy it. So I'm going to hold down Alt so that it copies it and drag that copy into this layer. And now there's that path for the circle. All right, so I have this one turned on. I'm going to turn that off. That was the original one, and show you how to do it, to remind you how to do a clipping path. Since you've been working in Photoshop for a while, you might have forgotten that element. So here's the circle that I just brought down from copied from the locked template, and that's my Photoshop file. I'm going to select both of these. I just held down Shift to select the other one, and then go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make. And now I've got that. The other thing that you want to add is the circle from the inside that will kind of be the poked out circle. So I'm going to copy that. There it is now. And drag it down to holding down Alt. So I'm making a copy of it. And now it should be in this layer, even though it's turned off. I'm going to turn it back on. There's that circle. I want to make sure it's on top. And I'm going to make it white. and we're not seeing it. Why? Because I dragged it into the wrong layer. That's why. So I'm going to move it up to this one. This is the one, this is the original one. And there that is. All right, so now we need to add the Photoshop file with the guitars on it. So I'm going to go to File and Place. And that is called guitars.psd. And I'll just click here, and then now I'll need to resize this. So I'm going to make this smaller and then start placing it here. I've already got guides for center. And so I'm just going to keep messing with this until I get that guitar, those guitars in the right place. And remember, I don't want anything important to go right here because that's the hole that's going to be punched out for the CD. So that looks about right. I want where they cross to be right in the middle. So, and it's still a little bit too big because, check this out. Notice what this says on the template. To avoid any essential items being cut off, keep text and critical design elements between the green dotted lines. So what it means is inside these green dotted lines. So I don't want this part of the guitar to get cut off. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, about like that. Let's turn this off and see how that's looking. Okay, that's looking good. And then we're going to add the songs. And again, I'm going to go to my original artwork to show you that part of it because I'm going to show you how to do the songs in another. There they are right there. And I'm going to move this or copy this up to this layer, and there they are. So I used type. I used type. The area type tool to create that. And again, I'm going to be showing you how to do that in another tutorial. So if I turn this off, now you can see the final product.